Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, or 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that's committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles to people throughout the world. Today, we have Andy Winter with us. Andy is a coach, consultant, and educator, and has been sharing the principles for over 25 years. He works with athletes, businesses, families, schools, and individuals, both young and old. Andy helps people understand their innate intelligence, well-being, and capacity for happiness, and how this is always available regardless of their circumstances or background. So Andy, I'm so happy that you agreed to join us today. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining me. I'd like to also say that Steph has agreed to join me in this conversation in particular. So as we're doing this, I find that it's much more enjoyable and sometimes more rich to have more than one person kind of feeding off of each other. So the topic that I came up with when asked if I would do this was, what's the name of it again? It's the answer is always love. And, what strikes me about that, I think this came up through a conversation that Steph and I were having, and it came up several times, but what really struck me about this as a topic is that no matter how often I forget that I'm the one creating my personal experience, no matter how often I get lost in taking something that's happening in the world personally, or wishing life was different, or imagining I should be different, or no matter what's going on around me, or even inside my head and my thinking, the moment the noise that's going on in my head clears at all, I'm automatically experiencing love in some form or another. It might feel like connection. It might feel like a closeness to the place where I am. It might feel like the form of it doesn't really matter, because wherever I am, I'm actually there at that point in a different way. And it's a really beautiful and warm feeling. So when I say the answer is always love, I don't mean like the kind of falling in love that one person does with another and decides to spend their life with them, or romantic love necessarily, but just that feeling of deep connection. And what's really been occurring to me more and more over the past year, I mean, I've been in this conversation about the principles for, I think, 27 years or so, and I had a chance to work with, Roger Mills when he was alive, and Sydney Banks when he was alive, and of course George and Linda, and like a lot. I've been around a lot of folks for a long time, and most of my work has been in the field of education. But more recently, I've sort of stepped out of that, and I'm now working more with individuals and in businesses and whatnot. But of late, what's really been occurring to me is beneath our personal thinking, or before our personal thinking, or upstream from our personal thinking. I mean, these are all metaphors, of course, but what exists when we're not entertaining what's happening up here in a personal way is the experience of the actual connection that we have to life, to everyone, and to the world. I mean, that is just true. Like that's actually the world we live in. It may not be the world we experience on a moment-to-moment basis. Sometimes we experience it as that, and sometimes we don't. But the truth is that connection is always there, to all things, to all people, for all times. And that experience, to me, knowing that, experiencing that, sort of continuously falling back into that is, to me, that's an experience of love, of connection, of both humility and astonishment, of yeah, just of our intimacy with life, because I'm not a person experiencing life. I'm life having the experience of being a person. I mean, the distinction may be awkward for people, but for me, it's become more and more obvious. So when I think about the answer is always love, what that in my experience, what happens more and more often for me is when I get caught up, when there's decisions to make, when there's issues that I'm having trouble with, when my daughter Emmy is who's 14 now and is just a really lovely human being and has kind of developed a joy of challenging me. And when I let that get to me, when I sort of get caught up in that, when I get caught up in the politics of my country or the politics of the world, when I get caught up in anything, the moment that I really see that my caught upness doesn't have anything to do with life as it really is, that it's just my thinking, I'm experiencing my connection again, and the connection is love, and the connection is warmth, and from that place, a different response to the same circumstances always shows up. Always shows up. So, like, I mean, parenting is just it's the place where I think, for me, it's such a beautiful opportunity to see myself and my struggles with showing up sometimes, because it's a place that I care deeply about, right? And it's in those places that we often hang on a little bit too tightly. We get attached to an outcome. We want what's best for our kids. We want to have closeness, or with our partners, and so it's in that arena for me. If I talk about that a fair bit tonight, it's because it's such a it looks so personal so much of the time, parenting, and I want it to work out. But what I find more and more is any sort of desire for things to be different than they are, any personal thinking I'm doing at all in the moment, is just the experience I'm having, but it's not the absence of connection to my daughter. Like, that can't exist, right? I mean, we know that for the people in our family, like, the connection that we have to each other, that doesn't go away just because we're busy-minded. We're just not experiencing that connection in the same way. Well, what I've begun to see more and more is that's true with all people all the time. That's true with the earth. It's true with that level of connection is there always. And the moment that I fall back into that and have faith in that connection, by the way we're hardwired, I start to get insights about what the next move should be, how best to serve the moment I'm in, that's not coming from my personal thinking. That's not coming from my training. That's not coming from what I think I should do, but comes from this deeper wisdom, this deeper knowledge, this deeper intelligence that gives me, sometimes as a whisper and sometimes as a shout, but gives me cues about how to move, what to say, and what to do next to serve this moment. If it's working, if it's a parenting moment with my daughter, if it's teaching, if it's doing this, speaking to people either online or publicly, if it's driving. I'm an athlete and a coach, and I work a lot with high performance athletes, particularly tennis players, and my daughter is one. And I experience that all the time, where in that arena too, where the quieter people, or the more people settle into their connection, the less thinking they're having about what they're doing, the more present they are to doing it, whatever the it is, whatever moment we happen to be in. And for athletes, that's quite critical, because they want to be where they are, right, all the time, on the court, playing their matches. So Steph, I'm wondering if you have anything to add to that or share about that topic.
Well, thanks, Andy. That you just about said it all. I've got nothing left now. I just want to say I am so. It's such a precious gift to be here with you, to hear you sharing, and with everybody else on the call. I'm deeply humbled. And yeah, we kind of had a good conversation a few weeks ago, didn't we, about the answer is always love. And to me, it seems so simple. Exactly as you were saying, my experience has been that when I engage with a person or I engage with a group of people, the minute that I can not pay attention to the noise in my head, something seems to happen. I kind of fall into this space, which I've only got my experience. I would not pretend to know what I'm talking about apart from how it feels to me. But this space that we fall into is the source. It's the essence. It's, I don't know what Sid called, he said, pure consciousness is pure love. It's pure consciousness before the contamination of thought. Now, I wouldn't say that I've experienced absolute pure consciousness and pure love, but to me, there is, whatever I do feel, whatever does happen in that space, it impacts people. It resonates with people. It takes people away from their own noise to a certain extent in my experience. So it kind of looks a bit, to me, it looks kind of simple, you know. If I'm in the contamination of my thinking, I've got like, this is my crap thinking, right? And I'm talking to somebody else's thinking. It's like crap thinking, talking to crap thinking. And it kind of, you know, it just doesn't go anywhere. But what seems to happen to me or for me is that when I can not pay attention to this and I can fall into this space, then what is in this space begins to talk to that same space in the other person. So that's where the connection is for me. We're talking from that space of essence, space of source, talking to that place in somebody else. And that has the effect of, so people don't feel judged. They don't feel as though you have an agenda. They don't feel as though you want something from them. They fall into that space and we connect on that level. That is everything. That is life. That is oneness. There's no separation. There's no person that we have to try and protect and enhance and somehow get better, and there's none of that. That to me is the real feeling of oneness. You know, that pure connection, that we don't have to do anything to get there. It's already there. So for me, I first experienced that when I realized just how much thinking I had when I was caring for my dad. We'd never seen eye to eye, and we always had a very difficult relationship ever since I was small. But later on in his life, I began to see how much I was bringing to the conversation, how much of this crap I was bringing to the conversation. And he was reacting with his crap. We were both just reacting to each other. The minute that I saw what I was doing with my own judgment and let that slip away, there was just love and compassion and connection. After 50 years, it fell away. After 50 years, the every single argument that we'd ever had, every single idea that we had of each other fell away. And I didn't have to teach my dad about the principles. All it took was for me to see what I was doing. And the minute I let that go and tried to talk to that space in him from that space in me, it changed everything. And for the last 2 years of his life, we had the best relationship. We had the best time. See, that is when Sid said the answer is always love, it has to be true, because that place of love is our true nature. That's who we are. And when we're in that place, we're not just loving and compassionate, but we're playful, we're creative, we're productive, we're engaged, we're all the cool stuff. All the cool stuff. So it just makes sense that to approach anything in life from that place has got to be the most effective, the most resourceful, the most fun, the most loving, because it's who we truly are. It's the essence of us. We're not engaging from a place of misunderstanding. We're coming from a place of truth. I feel really privileged to have experienced that over the last 3 or 4, 5 years. And it has transformed my life. Probably the biggest insight I've had.
Yeah, it changes everything. I mean, obviously it doesn't change anything, but at the same time, it changes everything. Thank you for sharing that stuff. Yeah, there's so many things you said that, anyway, that's just really touching. Thank you. What strikes me too about when we are experiencing that, the connection's always there, but when we're experiencing that connection and when we're open to whatever we're called to do in that moment, we truly don't know what that's going to be. The ideas, the things that show up that allow us to go deeper or to be of greater service to a person or to prevent an emergency from happening or to miss an oncoming car or to like the level of insight we have and the ideas that show up from there are often very different than from what shows up when we're not there. And even if they're not different, even if it's the same thing that we decide to say or the same action we decide to take, because our feeling is so different, it's like we can't be imbalanced because there's nothing to unbalance. Like the part of me that I think of as me is so a part of the bigger part of me that there can't be any imbalancing. So it doesn't matter how hard someone pushes. It doesn't matter what sort of forces show up in the world. They're all part of that too. And it just feels very differently. So yeah, I mean, what has really struck me over the last while is that I've seen more and more that there's nothing, like I don't have to wait to be in a really great state of mind. I don't have to, like that, for a long time I thought that I needed to kind of wait till peace showed up. Wait till peace of mind came to me, and then I could go do stuff. Like then I could be good. Then I could and like peace of mind. What I've become more and more aware of, and what really I was struck by what you just said was, peace of mind is always there, whether I'm experiencing it in that instant or not. Peace of mind is, like you're saying, it's the baseline. It's love is what we really are. Peace of mind is what we really are. It's like, it's like the metaphor of the ocean where the little waves that we see at the top, we look out and we think, oh, that's the ocean. But we know that's not really the ocean. That's just like the tiniest bit of the ocean, right? That's just this superficial thing that happens to be happening right in this instant due to wind or rain or whatever temporary kind of effects are happening. But the ocean is something much bigger than that. It's vast. It's full of life. I was really struck by that the first time. I remember the first time I went snorkeling, and you put your gear on, and it's like, and you get the snorkel, and I always snorkeled as a kid some, but not around like large reefs. And then I moved to the Virgin Islands and went snorkeling my first time in the water. And I remember looking out, it was a really rough day. But I just went out anyway. I just moved there and I thought, God, I got to just do that. And there's white caps and it's like the surface was crazy. It was just crazy busy. And then the moment I put my face in the water, I'm looking and it's just, I'm looking 30 feet down at these coral reefs and those big sea fans are at the bottom, and they have these enormous sea fans. They're like 4 feet tall, and they're just going like slowly back and forth, they're back and forth, they're going back and forth. And I like put my head back up again, and this like crazy on the surface, and I put my face back in, and the fish are just, like and I guess it's like knowing that, like as a metaphor, knowing that no matter what I think is happening in the world, no matter how busy I am in this instant in my own thinking, no matter how busy someone else is in theirs, like what I'm seeing in that instant is nothing really. It's just this super temporary illusion, the super temporary like manifestation of just the personal thinking that's going on. But beneath that, or before that, or what enables that is something so much more profound. And I guess the biggest impact that's had on me is being willing to let go more, being willing to trust that like I can't fail at life, that I have to be enough. Like I used to live in life as if maybe I'm not enough. Maybe if I was better, maybe, and now I realize like of course I'm enough. That doesn't mean I do everything right. It just means, of course, I have what it takes because I am what it takes, and everyone else is too. I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone else, but that changes the nature of the game completely. It just, it's a complete game changer. And I guess the other thing I want to say, and then I was thinking maybe unless you wanted to add something too after I say this stuff, but I was curious if anyone had questions. But before I do that, the other thing I wanted to point out is that one thing that people often fear about kind of letting go of control and letting go of the expectations about what they should do or what they shouldn't do or what other people should do is kind of like the fear of things spiraling out of control, or the fear of worry. I mean, I had that experience, the worry of, when I am present with where I am, if it's time to be fierceness shows up. It's like a lion, like they'll just lay around and do their thing until it's time to protect their cubs, right? And then suddenly it's not time to lay around anymore. They have a different idea shows up because it's appropriate for that moment. And I guess, that's the other thing I wanted to really be clear to people is that, and you mentioned it, Steph, is that everything is available to us. Like what's available to us at all times has a much greater bandwidth than what we think is available to us. Has a much greater, like literally an infinite amount of ideas and insights can occur to us in a moment that are of service to the moment we're in. But it doesn't always mean sitting peacefully and meditating. It's not that at all. Like this is, as an EMT, I experienced it. As an athlete, I experienced it. Driving a school bus, I experienced it. That when we quiet down, when the noise diminishes, our capacity to be of service to the moment we're in just goes up, or our awareness of that capacity goes up.
Yeah. Just got one little thing to add. That's perfect. That's perfect. The way you described it. And there's a way that there's a word that's been bandied around just recently on different kind of 3P channels called disruption, and disruptive technology, and loving disruption. And what I hear in what you say is that we can be fierce, we can respond in the moment in the appropriate way that's needed, that the moment needs. But it can be done from that place. It can be done from, not loving lovey-dovey as in sort of romantic love, but it can be done from a place of equanimity, from a place of connection, from a place of compassion, but we still respond appropriately. We have the full range of emotions at our disposal in order to be of service to what the moment needs. I love that idea. We have the full spectrum to play with. And when we're not paying attention to the noise, to the contamination, and it's coming from that place of equanimity, from that place of not necessarily calm, but that place of non-judgment. It has a different, it lands differently, it has a different impact with people. It's much less, people feel the non-personal quality to it, and they don't react to it in the same way. They understand where it's coming from. Even if they don't intellectually, they feel it. And that's been huge for me. It's been absolutely huge in all the interactions that I had where I have had to be disruptive. I'm not generally a disruptive kind of guy, but it's fun sometimes when the moment calls for it. Anyway, I'll shut up now. We'll see if there's any questions out there.
Hello, and thanks for this talk. It's really amazing to be here. I have a question for Steph. So you said that there's two ways of interacting, like crap thinking, or deep thinking to deep thinking. My sort of question is, sometimes before an interaction, I'm into the space of love, and then I interact with someone who has a lot of what I see as disconnecting from source. And then it brings me up. So what do I do in these situations? Or how can I say?
Such a good question. So for me, is it Boyan?
Boyan, yeah.
Okay, Boyan. Nice to meet you, Boyan.
Nice to meet you.
So for me, it's all about noticing. It's all about observing. So if I'm in a place of calm and love, and then somebody reacts to me in an aggressive way, I can begin to react to that. But if I am showing up in the moment, and I can notice those uncomfortable feelings coming up in me, I know that I'm off. I know that I am going to that crap versus crap place, you know, and noticing that in me. I don't have to see what the thinking I'm having, but noticing just that I'm having an uncomfortable feeling is enough. Most of the time, not always, but most of the time is enough to alert me to the fact, and that has the effect of popping me out of it to a certain extent. I can think, oh, okay, yeah, you don't really want to take any notice of that, and that is that's how the system works. That's how well designed we are for reality, for being in the moment, in this moment, in connection. The system tells us when we're going somewhere else, you know. So that's been really useful for me to know that any time I have any uncomfortable feelings, I'm not in this moment, I'm not showing up, and I'm not present. And I don't have to look at the the thinking that I'm having. I just know that if I'm feeling off, that's not a good train to get on. And that usually has the effect of bringing me back into this moment. And when I'm there, I don't react.
Makes sense.
Does that, what are you hearing in that, Gordon?
I'm hearing that I am too focused on the other person when I interact, and I should also maintain at least a bit of awareness in what is happening in me. And yeah,
that's cool. That's very cool.
Can I jump in on that too a little bit? I love what you had to say, Steph, and I love the question. It's great, Plan. You know what's occurred to me over the last few years is I mean, this sounds harsh, but it's not harsh at all. But it sounds harsh. Like 5 years ago or 10 years ago, this would have sounded really harsh, but I sort of don't care so much anymore. You know, like I don't care that I get busy-minded. You know, I don't care that someone else gets busy-minded so much, because it's just this temporary thing that's happening. You know, it's like looking up, it's like snorkeling and looking up at the waves and looking down at the waves. Now, I can look at the waves and be like, gosh, I really wish these waves weren't so big. I wish the waves were different. I wish it should be different. But the waves are just doing what they do. They're just being waves. And then I look down and it's just doing what it's doing. And so it's sort of like as my faith in what's beneath all of that has increased, as my understanding of what's behind all of that has increased, my attention on what's happening on the surface, I'm just not that, I mean, it sounds funny, but I'm just not that interested in it. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. And even when I get caught up and I'm like, oh my God, you should know better. And then that's funny too, right? Like I should know better. Well, when I'm in it, if I get caught in it, if I join them, you know, up there, for that instant, for whatever time I'm there, I'm just caught up. But the moment, like Steph was saying, that I see it, then it's kind of like, it's a little bit of a chuckle or a little bit of a, like, I just don't care as much. And my daughter is, you know, she's 14, and when she was about 10, we live in Vermont, and there's a lot of dairy farms around us, you know, and in the spring, they spread manure, right? And they spread manure, and as the wind's blowing your way, it's a pretty strong smell. And as my daughter picked up on this understanding, you know, she was really cute about it, because she just, I saw an interaction she was having with a student at her school, and the person was being really disrespectful and really kind of like not nice to her, and she sort of just took it. You know, she just let her friend kind of diss on her. And so I asked her about it on the way home. I said, I'm curious, like, what was going through your mind in that, you know, during this thing? And she said, well, she was just being a manure spreader, but she didn't know it. You know, she said she didn't realize she was just being a manure spreader. And so it smells bad, but it goes away, you know? And so she said, I thought I could either throw it back or just wait till it washes off, because it's going to pass. And you know, she was 10, I think, when she said that. And it just hit me like, boom, there it is. It's like, the less I care about what's happening in the instant and whether it fits the expectations I have, or people are behaving rightly, or I'm in the right state of mind, or the less I care about all that personal stuff, the more available I am for where all that comes from in the first place. You know? And there's nothing to do. There's nothing to fix. There's no different way to be. Because what shows up is what shows up in any instant. And sometimes I'm the manure spreader. And I don't like it, but I spread it until I realize I'm doing it. And as soon as I stop doing it, I stop doing it. And then I apologize and try and help people get cleaned up a little bit if I made a mess of things, just like anyone else does. Anyway, that's a beautiful question. I don't know if any of that was helpful, but
Yes, definitely.
you're welcome. Anyone else have any questions or thoughts or things that are occurring to them? Liz? Hi, Liz.
Hi, Steph. Thank you very much. I've loved the metaphors that you've used, Andy. The ocean metaphor was magic, and the manure one I think will stick with me as well. It's great. I'm I'm relatively new to the three principles, and just soaking everything up at the moment, and reading everything I can get hold of. So I'm really fascinated by it all, and you know, I've had quite a few insights, and really beginning to sort of feel it and live it. But I'm also a sort of a beginning coach, life coaching. So I've got a teaching background, and I'm moving into life coaching. And I just wondered how you go about helping your clients get an understanding of the three principles, because it's one thing sort of talking about it and sort of explaining it, but if the person isn't hearing it, or it isn't open to it, it just sort of maybe sounds like blah 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 blah, here's another sort of gimmick. And I just wondered whether it's just being patient, and whether their insight will come at some stage. And I just wondered what your experiences are with that.
Do you want to answer that, Andy? And I'll give it a go.
Either way, go ahead. Why don't you go ahead, Steph?
Okay. That's a really good question, Liz. That's a good question. So I think coaching with the three principles is different to pretty much any other type of coaching. So what we do with the principles is we point people towards their own wisdom. So we're like the space in which they can have insights. And I like the simplicity Mark Howard describes the way he does it. As he says that, so I get them to talk about their world for a minute, and then I tell them how it looks in my world, and then we compare notes. And what I think he means by that is that it's not so much an education process. It's not right, these are the three principles: mind, thought, and consciousness. This is how it works. It's more like you have a conversation with the client about how they see their world, and then you get an idea of where their misunderstanding is. And if we show up, if we are open to the moment, and we're responsive to the moment, then what happens is wisdom speaks through us. So we have an understanding of the principles, but if we're alive, as Andy was saying earlier, if we're alive to the moment, then we find the right response. And it's not just us. It's not just us doing it. You know, we're in collaboration with life. And life will give us what we need to say, and then the person, if they're in the right space, will hear what they need to hear to heal, or to whatever it is they want from the conversation. So it's a much more graceful, elegant process that isn't us helping them. It's not us giving advice. The process is finding that space between you and your client where they can be in that in an open receptive place, and then the conversation flows from wisdom. The conversation flows from what the moment needs. And I know that kind of sounds a little bit kind of out there, but that is one of the things that we find with students is we watch them very slowly gain trust. They have grounding, they understand the principles, but the art of it, as Michael Neal would say, is being able to listen to the client deeply, but also listen for wisdom, listen for what needs to be said in that moment. And then it's not up to you. Then it's how mind, it's how life interprets what is being said and what is needed in the moment to the client. That's when they see insight. That's when they join the dots for themselves, and they can see how certain aspects of the principles are at play in different parts of their life. That's where transformation happens. So it's a very beautiful, very graceful process, and the good news is it's not on us. All we have to do is see something about the principles for ourselves, and if it's appropriate, if it's something that's relevant to the client, we might share it. And then we just ask questions, and we just get really curious about how their world looks. And we will, wisdom will show us where their misunderstanding is. And then it's just a question of following wisdom. And it can be really graceful. It can be really beautiful. Sometimes it can be disruptive, but it's not all on us. It's a lot easier than it looks. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it does. Using your analogy of the fists and that.
Yeah.
If we can stay there, then rather than us going there, as Boyan was saying, was sort of bringing.
Yes.
They will, if we trust the process.
Yes.
That they will come down and work with us. So it's about what I'm hearing is it's about being authentic and trusting.
Yeah.
Trusting what we know. And
that is absolutely spot on, because what I notice in most of the coaching sessions that I have is that people show up in a busy-minded state because they've been thinking about their issue, they've been thinking about the content, and they've been working themselves up. Okay, what am I going to say? How am I going to describe what's going on? And they're just getting deeper and deeper and deeper into their issue. And what happens is, if we show up and we are respectful of that, and we are loving and compassionate and non-judgmental, then at some point in the conversation, you can see them slowing down. And at some point, when they get slow enough, then that's where insight can occur. That's when they get open enough to see something or hear something that impacts them. So what you described was perfect. That's exactly how I see it. Exactly.
Brilliant.
I mean, sometimes it doesn't work exactly like that, but in my experience, that is the gift that we can give people.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And letting go of any expectation you have of someone getting something from it, or any expectation you have of you being responsible. I mean, I felt like the part you said about that stuff that's really key. Like realizing it's not on you. It can't be, Liz. It can't be on us. Like we're not in a position to give anyone anything. It's like, so I'm in Spain right now, and I just got back from Morocco. My daughter's training in tennis here in Spain, but she has an injured wrist, and so we had some time. So we went to Morocco for a week, which was just lovely, and we traveled around a little bit, and we ended up spending 2 or 3 days in the Sahara Desert, which was just stunning and just amazing, and so so we're in the Sahara Desert, and I don't know how far out into the desert we are. We're camping for a couple of nights with a bunch of people that we don't know. And there's a fire, and there's music and all this. And then the fire goes out, and then some people go to bed, but a lot of us just wander out into the desert, and find a place away from all the light, and look up. And, in the absence of all the light pollution, it's like the stars and the Milky Way, just zooms down, and it's like the vastness of the universe and the it's a really profound experience. Like I've spent a lot of time. It's the first time for my daughter, and to see her look up and say, "Oh my God, I had no idea." Right? I had no idea, she said, I could tell her eyes welled up. She's like, "Oh my God." She just kept saying that. It's so beautiful. And so, like, I feel like for me, sharing the principles is like that. There's nothing for me to do. Like what we're talking about and looking at and what we know that's there is, it's that same experience of looking at this night sky in the absence of light and having just the beauty of the universe just show up in such an intense way. You can't help but be moved by it, right? Like that's not me. I didn't do it. Like you see, it's like I had nothing to do with her having that experience except being with her while she had it. And if I went out there and like, God, I just want her to blow her mind. And if I went out there and I was trying to coach her to be like, like to really get a lot out of it, if I had a lot of stuff on that experience, she may not have been as open to it or not, who knows. But I was just excited to be there with her and look at how vast the universe is. Well, if we approach coaching like that, which is a really different, I was a teacher forever and ran schools, and that's not how schools work, and that's not how teaching typically works. But when we do it like that, when you find someone that's so in love with a subject or a topic or a thing that when they look at it, they like, you just feel it. They have such an appreciation and respect for it that it kind of washes off on whoever they're with. Well, that's what sharing this is about to me. It's just so simple because we don't have to do anything. And that you don't go out and look at the night sky in the desert with an expectation about what to say. It might be like, holy, it might be like, oh my God, it might be, a story might occur to you. You're like, there's no reason to go in with a plan. I just go in with just kind of humility and just a tremendous appreciation for the chance to look in this direction with another person. And it's beautiful. And they see what they see. And oftentimes too, it may not occur to them. There may not be, like in a coaching session, people may or may not have insights. It might be a year later when the penny drops and they have an experience and they're just like, oh my, I've had students call me up or clients call me up and be like, oh my God, I had a boss once, he called me up, who 4 years later, he calls me up out of the blue and just said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I never understood what you were saying. I didn't listen. I wasn't listening. I didn't understand. But the penny dropped, and he saw what he saw. So really we have to take ourselves off the hot seat when we're sharing this, and put ourselves under the stars instead, because then the work is done for us. And as soon as we think it's us, then that's what people feel. We become teachers. And and Sid was really clear. I mean, at one point in his life, Sid went away, like he disappeared from humanity as best he could, because he was seeing that people thought he had anything to do with this understanding. I mean, Sid was seeing that, like, there were boatloads of people showing up to hear what Sid had to say, and they were confusing what he was looking at with him, as if he had anything at all to do with it, except the privilege of having a really profound look at sort of behind the veil, a look at where our experience comes from. And so he went away for a long time to sort that out and to figure out how to come back to the world and then be there with people and share this in a way where they didn't confuse what he was looking at with him. And that's really important. I mean, I'm just so grateful that he did that, because so often I think, even with people who have really profound insights like Sid had, that either they get caught up in how profound it was and that they're somehow special, or other people somehow think they're special. And he tried to be really clear to make a separation between him and what we're looking at and what we're talking about. Because he had really nothing to do with it. He just saw the night sky in the desert and then talked about it, And if only, and for those few people that get a chance to do that and they talk about it, it's poetry, it's beauty, it's magic. It's like the first astronauts who went up and looked back at the Earth and they saw it and they cried, and they were just like, oh my God, we had no, I'm getting choked up. But they really had no idea how beautiful the Earth was from afar, and that it's clearly this living entity that, like, they could see that. It was unquestioning. And when they came back and talked about it, people could feel that too, even though they hadn't seen it for themselves yet. But that's kind of what we're doing. At least that's what I do. I'm most effective when I approach it like that, without any expectation that anyone's going to get anything out of it, except maybe enjoy a little bit of time together. And the less I kind of care about the outcome and more enjoy the interaction, the more present I am and the more available I am for insights to show up that actually are helpful. Or maybe saying nothing is the most helpful thing. Like, like we just don't know what's going to be most useful in that moment. Thank you for your question. It's a really lovely question. It's 9. Yes, I still have time. I don't know where anyone else is, but I'm happy to take more questions, or Steph, if you have anything to add, or I don't know what your schedule's like either, Steph. But I have a little bit of time.
I'm good. I'm good to stay.
So you're here. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add, or questions they have, or thoughts?
You can wait or unmute yourself, raise your hand. Anyone else?
There's a question in the chat box.
Ah. Oh.
Are you able to see it, Andy?
I am. I just pulled it up. Shall I read the question? Is that okay? I think it is. I'll just read the question. Thank you for this webinar. As my English isn't the best in the world, mine isn't either, by the way. My Spanish is even worse. But anyway, as my English isn't the best in the world, I would rather type than speak. My question, please, would be how to avoid the misunderstanding of the connection felt when we talk with someone, trying to help them see the principles in action. I mean, one day as a friend, I spoke to a good friend, and while I felt great, I felt a great connection. I even woke up the next day singing It's a Beautiful Day by Queen. I realized that the connection could be interpreted as a romantic one, which wasn't the case, but still my concern remained. As a professional, it's easier because the relationship is clear, at least should be. But as a friend, it might be misinterpreted. So how can we avoid this? That's a really lovely question. Yeah, that's... that can be tricky. I mean, I think, you know, as I began to see people, as I began to see the beauty in people more and more, I sort of fell in love with them. I don't know what other word to use for it, but I would feel this really profound connection with other folks, and because in some cases that's really unusual for folks to feel that intensity, that it can be misinterpreted. But I think, you know, just like we were saying about when you're coaching, or when you're driving a car, or when you're parenting, when you're doing it from this place, if you know where you are, if you know you're balanced in this moment, that there's nothing outside of you that can imbalance you in any way, shape, or form, typically I've become much more aware of the likelihood that it's being misinterpreted. You know, I get feedback about that too. I get feedback about how close we are, or there's not a lot of thinking about it. It just sort of shows up. It's in the same way that if you're playing if I'm playing a tennis match, and I pick up on some cue that tells me to start to move for the cross-court forehand before the person is even hitting the ball, because I'm in tune with where I am, and I get that information, and then I respond to it. And then it's, you know, and I feel like with this understanding, and the more I trust in it, the more my awareness allows me to just pick up on, it's not my awareness, the more awareness there is, and it allows situations to be diffused before they become situations. And if there is confusion, it again, if my ego stays out of it, it's really easy to find ways of staying connected to someone, but also explaining the situation. And it's very respectful, and it's very clean and clear. And I think we're given whatever we need for the moment, and it helps. And the more we trust that, the less we end up stepping in quicksand. And then when we do step in quicksand, or it appears that we did, the less we panic because we're in quicksand, because we see that's an illusion too. And it's like, oh, I can totally see how that happened. And then we just find a graceful way of helping to clear up the situation. And it happens, it happens, you know, I don't want to say a lot, but it happens with some frequency where people get close to each other and they imagine something that's possible that maybe isn't. But that's life, right? I mean, that's how life works. So I don't know if that's helpful at all. Great. Yeah, and that's, I'm glad you brought the word up. There was another chat there, and the word fear, because that's one of the things that occurred to me. I sat down for a few minutes and was just like thinking about this question about love. And, you know, I feel like for me, this is just my experience, so I don't know what it's like for anyone else, but when I'm in this, when I fall into, when I lean into, when I fall into, when I put my face in the water, whatever words you want to have for when I allow myself to feel this deeper connection to all things and all people, when I see that I am indeed one, like I know that sounds strange, but when I just see that, fear, it doesn't exist there. Like the illusion of fear, of things not working out, of something bad happening, of like fear dissolves in the presence of understanding, because there's no, it's fear is just like this illusion of disconnection. It's the idea that that things may not work out the right way. And once I began to see there's no right way, then fear had less of a grip on me. Any other questions, folks have, or thoughts?
Thank you so much, Andy. And Steph, this was a really beautiful conversation. Anyone else have anything before we wrap up? Do either of you have anything that you want to say?
Yeah, I would love to just say that I'm just really grateful to have spent a little bit of time with everybody on here, and thank you, Steph, for joining me, and thanks for hosting this. It's been lovely, and I've just really enjoyed spending time with all of you. I'm looking at your little pictures on my screen. Some of you have them, some of you don't, but I just have had a really nice time. And if anyone would like to get in touch with me for any reason, right now email would be the best way, and my information is on the 3PGC website, although it may not have the correct email address now, so I'll double check that, and if it's wrong, I will change that. But I would love to hear from anybody if you care to connect.
I can post your email, the one that I have under the video, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Yeah, it's yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. And just want to let everybody know that the next webinar is on December 12th, and it's with Mara Gleason Olson.
Wow.
Hope that you can all join us then. Bye,
everybody. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Steph.
Bless you.
Bye.
Bless you.